Hey y'all, I hope you're doing so well today. It's a pretty day today, although I don't know what day you're going to be watching this. So today we're going to talk about the humanists and what they thought about personality, and they were developed very much to contradict Freud, because they thought Freud was a little wacky. Now remember, Freud had thought human beings were fundamentally bad. We were driven by sex and aggression, and really the only thing that kept us in check was society. The humanists take the exact opposite approach. They think when we're born, we're fundamentally good, that we're each our own little special snowflake. We have our own specials and talents and abilities, and if the world would just treat us well, that we'd all turn out wonderfully well. But he said that's not what happens. I'm talking about Carl Rogers here specifically right now. He said that most of us don't receive from the world what we need to receive, and what he thought that was unconditional positive regard. Again, if we're loved, for whatever we want to be and whatever we want to do, then we'll turn out to be happy, healthy, productive citizens. But he said most of us have a lot of conditions of worth placed upon us. I love you if you act the way I think you should act. I love you if you meet my expectations. And so most of us only receive what he called conditional positive regard. I only love you when you act the way I want you to act. And so he said that created a conflict between our real self and our ideal self. Let me go back to the right page. And I'm really losing it. Okay. Here. Sorry about that. Okay. That our real self is the self that's developing under the pressure of conditional positive regard and conditions of worth, and our ideal self is really kind of what we were meant to be. So maybe you were meant to be a poet, right? You have this amazing ability. It's kind of natural and inborn in you. And if the world would treat you well, then maybe you'd turn out to be the absolute best poet of all times. But you might go home one day and say, Mom, Dad, I want to be a poet. And they're like, right. No, you can't do that. You can't get a job with that. You need to do something else. Why don't you be a business major? And so that's their condition of worth. I really don't love what you want to be. I'm only going to love you if you act the way I think you should act, be what I want you to be. And so that causes a conflict. If they pursue what their parents want, their real self ends up being depressed and unhappy, whereas their ideal self would have been a poet. All right, let me try to give you a better example of that. So I think I told you I taught at West Point, the United States Military Academy, for a while, and the students that get into that place are students that should make every parent proud as they can be, because they're all like 4.0 students, they're all athletes, they're all amazing. And I had this student freshman year, and she just hated it there. She really didn't want to be there. She just wanted to go home. She wanted to go to law school. I think she even had a full scholarship. And so every couple of weeks she'd be in my office crying because she didn't want to be there. And she'd call her parents and say, I want to quit. I just want to go to a regular college. And they'd say, no, stick it out for a couple more weeks. If you don't like it, you can come home. And this went on for the better part of the semester until finally her parents said to her, if you don't graduate from West Point, you can never come home again. Okay, that was the condition of worth, right? We don't love you unless you act the way we want you to. So she was definitely receiving conditional positive regard, which was, tugging her. Her real self was trying to meet their demands. Her ideal self, heck, she wanted to be a lawyer. That's not exactly disappointing to most parents. So she had a conflict between these two because she was not receiving unconditional positive regard under that situation. So she was unhappy. She was depressed. I used to see this when I did counseling with freshmen. They'd come in and I'd look at their folders, and they sucked at math, and they'd sucked at science, and they were signed up to be engineering majors. And I'd be like, why are you signed up for this? And like, my parents won't pay for college unless I'm in engineering. So if they go into that field, they're going to be unhappy. They're not going to be very good at it. They're going to spend the next 40 years. They might start drinking, all kinds of things. So Rogers said that most of the world's emotional ills were caused by this conflict between what we were meant to be, what we truly have an ability for, and what society is expecting us to be. Okay, and so we lack congruence. Congruence is when your real self and your ideal self match up and you're allowed to kind of be what you want to be. So for example, my mom wanted me to be an elementary school major. I tried it for a while. I didn't like the classes. I was skipping classes. I wasn't doing great in them. They finally let up. They let me take psychology classes. And then, of course, I was much happier. My grades went up to a 4.0. And I had more congruence in that situation. Okay, so that is Carl Rogers. And so self-actualization, both Maslow and Rogers believe in this idea of self-actualization. And essentially, it's fulfilling your unique potential. So being all you can be is what they mean by self-actualization. And they think, unlike Freud, who said sex and aggression are our most fundamental drives, they had the very optimistic view that this was our most basic fundamental drive, that we're all striving to fulfill our own unique potential. Abraham Maslow was also a humanist. He came up with a hierarchy of needs. I don't think there's much on the test about that, but you can look him up in the book and see what his basic hierarchy is. Basically, he had 3 large levels. First, we have physical needs we have to meet, things like food, shelter, safety. And we can't move on to a higher level of needs until we have those first dealt with. Like, how hard or how easy is it for you to study for a test if you're absolutely starving? It's hard. How easy is it for you to study for a test if you haven't had any sleep? Again, it isn't. So those are our most basic needs that we have to fulfill first. Then we have emotional needs for love and belonging. And then after that, he thought we could really strive for self-actualization to be intellectually stimulating or pursue art or these higher kind of cognitive fulfilling activities. It wouldn't come until we had our emotional and physical needs filled. But again, I think look for a triangle, and that'll be Maslow. All right, this last section is kind of the trait perspective of personality, and this is kind of the more modern view of personality. They've stopped trying to have theories to explain where a personality comes from and are mostly describing them. The Big Five, you can look those up in the book. Essentially, what we have found is there's 5 basic traits that are really universal regardless of culture. They're even starting to think they can find those in dogs. But they spell out the acronym either canoe or ocean. But with ocean, we have openness to experience. We have conscientiousness. We have extroversion and introversion. We have agreeableness, and we have neuroticism. And so those are kind of 5 dimensions on which our personalities seem to vary. And if you look at the exercise I gave you for this chapter, I gave you a link so you can do a survey to see exactly where you fall on the Big Five. Gene-environment interaction is the idea, I keep doing that, is the idea that obviously nature and nurture build up our personality equally. So for example, in high school, I won an award for being the most shy person, like in high school. And obviously you probably realize I'm not very shy now. That is because of a change in environment. I went into a field where I had to do a lot of talking. I got a lot of practice doing that, so on and so forth. So, my family tends to be naturally introverted, but the environment made a lot of us into extroverts because we needed to be. Social cognitive theory really says we kind of observe others, and we probably have personalities like our family and stuff. So we pick it up from those we see around us. But let me just go through these different terms so you know what they are. They're kind of loose and unconnected, but you need to know them for the test. Reciprocal determinism is the idea that we influence the environment and the environment influences us. Okay, so I see a good example of this because like this semester I taught 5 different sections of intro. And as you know, the teacher has a huge impact on the environment in the class, right? So there's their personality affecting the environment. But on the flip side, each class for me turned me into a different person. I'd have one class that wouldn't say boo to me no matter what I did, and so I taught differently than a class that was very outgoing and asked a lot of questions. So I influenced that environment, but that environment also influences me. Self-efficacy versus self-esteem. It's important you know the difference between these two. Self-efficacy really has to do with competency in a specific domain. Like, I have high self-efficacy in psychology or in academics in general, but I have low self-efficacy. I'm going to do that 52 times. Okay. I have low self-efficacy in bowling because I suck at that. Okay. So self-efficacy is about competence in specific domains. It's pretty specific. Self-esteem is more global. It's your overall kind of perspective of yourself, be it good or bad. So high self-esteem, I think I'm awesome, or low self-esteem, I suck. Okay. So it's more global than self-efficacy. Spotlight effect is the feeling that everybody's noticing things about us. Like, if I get a stain on my shirt and I go into class, I spend the whole period going, is everybody noticing my stain? And that's spotlight effect, when really probably nobody cares. Self-serving bias, okay, is when we interpret things or make attributions that are to our benefit, okay? If I get an F on a test, I say, that teacher sucked. They didn't tell us that was going to be on there. It wasn't a fair test. But if you get an A, you don't say that was an easy test. You say, I'm awesome, and I deserve that A. Okay, so it's the tendency to make explanations that protect our self-esteem. Narcissism is being a little too in love with yourself. Okay, it's excessive. And there's narcissism scales online if you want to take your test and see how you do on those. But it's being very self-involved, not being empathetic to others, and so forth. Okay, these are important too. Individualism versus collectivism. These tend to be very culturally based. Okay, we happen to live in an individualistic culture. So if you grew up your whole life here, you probably have an individualistic personality, meaning you're very focused on your own personal goals. You may feel like you spend a lot of time thinking about other people, but you probably don't compared to some other cultures. If you're from a collectivistic culture, the focus is on the group, okay? They don't have a sense of I this, I that. They have a sense of we, okay? And so they're always thinking about how their actions impact the larger group. They're always putting the family, usually is the group, ahead of themselves. So, for example, if down the road you decide you want to marry somebody that your parents don't like, in an individualistic culture, you'd say, screw it, I'm going to marry him anyway. I don't care. I just won't talk to my parents ever again. Okay. Versus a collectivistic culture probably wouldn't start dating somebody unless their parents approved. Their parents' approval, family's approval would be extremely important. They'd be likely to break it off if their family didn't approve because the group goals supersede the individual goals. Okay, I hope that helped. I know that was a little discombobulated. I'll try to do better on chapter 14. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.